we are Group 6 and our presentation named for Sedentarisation and the destruction of the nomadic economy in the 1930s. Today, we are at the National Museum of Kazakhstan to trace the tragic transformation of the Great Steppe. Our ancestors lived as nomads for millennia, creating a unique civilization. However, within just a few years, in the 1930s, this entire economic system was violently dismantled. Our goal is to analyze museum artifacts as witnesses to this great wreck, showing how the loss of material culture led to a demographic and spiritual catastrophe.
To understand the destruction, we must first look at what was lost. Here is the yurt, Kizui. It wasn't just a house, it was a mobile masterpiece of material culture. Key fact: the nomadic economy was based on 5 jewels, Besaso: horses, sheep, cattle, camels, and goats. By analyzing this yurt, we can see that every part of it, the felt, the wooden frame, the leather ropes, came from livestock. It was a 100% sustainable circular economy. When the Soviet state forced nomads to move into fixed settlements, they didn't just change their houses, they destroyed their entire life support system. A nomad without his yurt and his seasonal migrations, Krailau and Kostau, was no longer a nomad. He was a victim of a system that didn't understand the steppe.
Now, look at this setup. In nomadic culture, livestock was the only true wealth. But in 1928, the Soviet policy of Little October, led by Philip Goloshokin, began the mass confiscation of animals. In 1929, there were about 40 million head of livestock in Kazakhstan. By 1933, that number dropped to only 4 million. That was a 90% loss of the national wealth. The forced sedentarisation meant that millions of animals were gathered in one place without enough food, called death. The destruction of the nomadic economy was a direct cause of the Great Famine. These beautiful saddles we see here become useless ornaments because there were no horses left to ride. Looking at these specific artifacts we photographed today, we can see a deep connection between art and the nomadic economy. These art are not just seats for riding, they are symbols of status and social structure. Notice the materials: silver, leather, and wood. This high level of craftsmanship proves that the nomadic economy before the 1930s was wealthy and highly organized. It required a network of specialized craftsmen and trade routes. When the economy was destroyed by forced sedentarization, this entire layer of professional culture disappeared because people no longer had the resources to support such art. The tragedy of these saddles is that by 1932 they become dead objects. During the mass confiscation of livestock, horses were either seized by the state or died from lack of fodder. Without horses, these beautiful saddles lost their practical purpose. They changed from being vital tools of a living civilization to silent museum exhibits. In our ancestors, spiritual culture of horse and its gear were part of man's honor. By taking away the animals and forcing people into fixed settlement, the Soviet regime didn't just take their food, they take their dignity. These empty saddles in this museum cases today serve as powerful metaphor for the empty pasture of the 1930s. They represent a life that was forcibly stopped, leaving behind only the tools of civilization that was no longer allowed to move.
This part of the museum is the most difficult to visit. These archival photos and documents prove the scale of the Asharshalik. Critical analysis force sedentarization wasn't a choice, it was a violent administrative tool. The nomads were forced into точки седания, settlement points, where there was no infrastructure, no seeds for farming, and no food. Demographic facts: between 1.5 to 2 million Kazakhs died of hunger, that was nearly 40% of the entire ethnic population. Over 600 people fled to China, Mongolia, and Iran. This wasn't just an economic failure, it was a breakdown of the spiritual culture. The tradition of hospitality, konakçılık, and family ties were crushed as people struggled to survive a man-made disaster.
Materially, the destruction of the nomadic economy was the destruction of Kazakh identity. Sedentarization failed analytically because it ignored the ecological reality of the steppe. You cannot turn a 1,000-year-old nomadic culture into a farming culture in just 2 years. For example, the artifacts we saw today, the yurt, the saddles, the jewelry, are the remnants of civilization that was almost erased. In conclusion, we believe that preserving this heritage is essential. Understanding the tragedy of the 1930s helps us value our independence today. It is our duty to remember that behind every artifact in this museum, there is a story of a culture that survived despite the attempt to destroy it.